on a good note that way, I guess. But our hands are tied with it for sure.
Right. Interviewing a person with a disability, they come in and they're obviously disabled, things to avoid talking about the disability or getting them to reveal it. They may do it on their own, but we can't ask. Focus your questions on job-related topics from a positive perspective. You know, how would you perform this task? Is there anything that prevents you from performing the task?
Sarah has a question.
I'm curious for like the clinical programs where we're hiring licensed staff or provisionally licensed staff, would it be, you know, because there could be a time where maybe they've had complaints against their license or the license has been restricted in some way in the past. And even if that's in the past, that wouldn't matter. I mean, it still matters, but it might not matter in the moment. But like, is there a question to ask to see if there's any current pending complaints on their license? Because I think that's important that like, we wouldn't want to, it's just a whole process then to get through hiring someone and then if they get their license revoked or.
So like if somebody's
like that.
in the process of potentially having this pending, there's no way of knowing until it's suspended or
I don't know,
whatever?
you might know. Is there a way of knowing, like, is that something maybe we should add to our?
Well, I kind of
Checks that
see it
we
in the
do?
same category as like asking if they're arrested versus convicted. Pending just means it's being reviewed
Right.
by the board and
Yeah.
they may,
It might be fine.
it may not get suspended or removed or, I mean,
Right.
it's being investigated, so to me, it falls in the same categories. If you're arrested, like, it doesn't mean you're convicted
Mhm.
yet.
Mhm.
So I think.
Right, but there's a difference
Add
between they were arrested 3 years ago and not convicted, and they were arrested last night and not convicted. So
Or-
if there's an active, like, open investigation,
My concern is
Right.
if they're coming from an employer,
right?
or maybe that's stemmed from, and they don't necessarily disclose that. I wonder if maybe that's a process we need to add. I don't know if we can
Right.
ask the board, like, do they have any, I don't know. I
The
don't know.
board
I
can
don't think
only
we release that.
disclose something after it's been settled on.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Will be
it's,
added to the job description? It must have valid license.
Well, that's something that's already on there.
I mean, you
but
could
yeah.
say like, yeah, because it could be suspended or restricted,
Right.
but pending is just it's investigating. And sometimes, like, the lawyers will look at it and be like, there's not even enough there to.
Right.
Because it goes to the chair of the board.
Right,
So then they make a decision about,
yeah.
Hmm.
And that could take some time, and I was just thinking, you know, if someone's, yeah. it's
That's
just
a good
some
question. I
Liability that
mean,
we.
fortunately,
kinda
we've
get
not
into.
had
Yeah.
not come across it, but it would be nice to be prepared if it did.
Would that be something that would be like a screening question? Any
Like when we're on the
current or
phone with
past
them?
action,
Yeah.
past or pending action against
We
the
can look
license?
into some language on that.
They have it
That's
on,
something.
well, like when you, reapply for your license or you apply for liability insurance, they have set questions you have to answer, like, is there any, so that would be a good questions to look at, like, how would you go about asking these questions? Because you have to be able to say no. Sure. To get the liability insurance or renew your license.
Yeah, just a thought.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll look into that.
We'll look at that.
Good question.
Mhm.
Good question.
Very good.
According to the EEOC, which is the Equal Employment, not in front of blank.
Employment opportunity?
Opportunities Commission. Any perform the essential functions of the job with or without an accommodation. So they could potentially perform the job with an accommodation. Think of maybe somebody can't type. There's something wrong with their hands, they can't type. There's pretty inexpensive software where you can talk and it'll type for you into the computer.
You've been typing all this time?
Your fingers work just fine, Joan.
The older I get, the harder it is.
Shouldn't have said that. All these requisitions
I'm gonna
are
start bugging,
software.
do we have any money left in the foster care budget? I have an idea.
Anytime we see Jody from now on, my
Can you
fingers
perform the
hurt.
essential functions of the job? Can you meet the attendance requirements? Those kind of things are fine to ask. Kind of a tricky, slippery slope when you're asking those questions, but things to avoid in that situation, do you have, it looks like you don't look well. Do you have diabetes? Do you have a disability that would interfere with your ability to perform the job? How many days were you sick last year? There could be a real good reason to use up all your sick time, but can't really ask that of a person. Interview notes, make sure they're factual, keep out opinion and biases, job-related information only, and keep them on file for a year. So if you don't want to do that, just send them our way, because we keep the application for a year. Other questions you guys had, can you have a candidate shadow the role they're interviewing for? You technically can, but it's called a working interview, and we have to pay them. So there's a lot of red flags with that. They'd have to obviously sign a confidentiality agreement, do an I-9 form, so they're legal to work in the United States of America, tax forms. They say if you're going to do that, have everything prepared up front, even have the check cut. So if you don't work out, it's your payment for shadowing, but I would kind of stay away from that. It's great, but.
So you're saying no, don't do that?
I'd say no. And I think payroll would have a real issue with that as well. So we'd have a lot of people mad at us, but it's a good concept, but we do have to pay them for it. Involvement of HR in the process. With ADP, that's kind of evolving. You did a training this morning, so supervisors go to that training. You'll find out more about that, but somebody's gonna approve a posting. Typically, that'll be a director or an officer, and then we'll ask you a bunch of questions about that posting before you put it up. At this point, we're gonna help set up the interviews. It may evolve to where supervisors have the power to do that themselves at some point, but we're not there yet. And then, what's the next step, Nina? We're setting up interviews. We're going to make the offer. We're going to decline candidates, all that kind of fun stuff. When there's a second interview, and I think that's coming up when we'll have, maybe not. Oh yeah, it's right there. When there's a second interview, HR will be involved in the second interview. Somebody from HR, so that we have some representation there. So that's kind of how HR gets involved. When you automatically do second interviews, we're doing them for supervisory positions and above. If you have a direct care worker, for example, and there's really no reason to have a second interview, you know that this is the right person, we're not going to make them go through that. But the important positions, like what you guys hold,
Those other
especially
positions are
Jody
important.
Smith's position, you really want to take that
Leader.
seriously and have two interviews. You may still think, I know this person's probably going to be the one, but a second interview, you could bring in other opinions, other people, and really take a deep dive into that interview process and make sure you're making the right call. And again, HR will be part of that. So supervisors, coordinators, managers, directors, officers, etc. We already answered, can I end the interview after 10 minutes if it's not a good fit? I wouldn't advise that because it leaves a bad taste in their mouth and they're going to talk about the agency and they made the time to come in here, apply for a job. It's not necessarily their fault that they're not a good fit, so we want to give them a good experience. And can we use personality tests? You can. They say if you do that, it should only be 30% of your decision-making process. People have a tendency, okay, this is not the personality we're looking for, to make that 100% of your decision-making process. If it's to say, is this a good fit for the job, for the team, then again, you're getting all like-minded people in there and you're not looking at your biases appropriately. So it's probably not a good idea. Kelly actually went to a training and gave me this information that she found about personality tests. If an assessment is intended for pre-hire use, selection decisions such as hiring, it must meet the very strict standards of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. What they set forth for use of these scenarios essentially requires statistical proof that the assessment is measuring what it claims to measure, the questions are sound and functionally correct, that steps have been taken to minimize adverse impact or bias as much as possible. And meeting these standards takes a great deal of time, rigorous study, and resources. It sometimes takes months to develop these questions. You can buy that, and they've pretty much done this for you, so you're paying a fee to do that. But I wouldn't recommend we do it ourselves because there's too many red flags for that.
In fact, we've discontinued it and are not doing it anymore.
Super.
So no personality
No.
test?
Correct.
Okay.
And the
The
ones
short
that,
Again,
answer
to be
is
clear.
no.
No.
and the ones that meet all those criteria are very expensive.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
The only exception I would say is if it were designed to mirror me. If everybody was like me, if they fit that, and then, yeah, that's the exception.
There can only be one you.
Should I read those fake questions again?
Would never be able to hire.
Yeah, they went to, there was that about mental fitness question, if I was asked that. I wouldn't be here.
Dan, can you talk a little bit more about like, having, say, a second round interview for, like a peer type interview where it's frontline staff that maybe join the interview versus a second round interview that's maybe other supervisors interviewing a supervisor? I mean,
So team being involved after the
yeah,
first
because I
round.
think that can be really important, especially if it's like a supervisor being hired,
Uh-huh.
teams.
Then you gotta prep them on all that.
That's what I was curious
Right.
about, like what goes into that.
Right, yeah, right, you've got to prep them, you got to make sure there's no bias involved in that. You have to make sure there's a key decision maker. They have to know that they're there to give their opinion perhaps, but it's not going to be their decision who's hired. And then you got to deal with the fallout if they don't agree with that. So there are some pitfalls with that.
Yeah, because like someone who did that once or twice for the first time and didn't prep that, had to sit there and go, you didn't say that.
Oh, no.
And then realize that.
Yeah.
Sometimes that thing of assigning, like having just the questions.
Oh, that's true.
Be asked and telling, if you involve those people, saying they don't get to ask a lot of follow-up questions, or
Yeah.
they're really
Mhm.
there to give some
Mhm.
feedback,
Mhm.
but,
Yeah,
yeah.
good ground rules. All right, that's all I had. Any other questions? Well, thanks for coming, guys.
Thanks, Dan.